The morning mist enveloped the imposing glass bridge of the Grand Canyon skywalk. Letícia, 28, an urban photographer from New York, was looking for the perfect light for her next exhibition. With her camera in hand, she felt a crack under her feet. The glass was cracked. The crack, however, was not what disturbed her. The vision that hit her was a cold, cutting echo. The bridge splitting, dozens of tourists falling into the abyss, a symphony of screams and shards. The air became thin. She screamed, the alarm sounded, and the bridge was evacuated. Destiny had been avoided. Or so she thought. The smell of sandalwood and incense hung in Leticia's small studio in a bohemian neighborhood of Brooklyn. The lights of New York City twinkled through the window, but Leticia's mind was in a different place. The glass bridge. The vision had been so vivid, so real, that the images of the fall still echoed in her head. That night, she began to review the photographs she had taken. The click of the camera was like a drum beating in her chest. The photos revealed the spectacle of the landscape, the vastness of the canyon, the blue of the sky. However, in each image, there was a small detail that shouldn't have been there. In the center of her computer screen, a dark silhouette, standing right at the point where the glass had broken. It wasn't a person, nor a shadow. It was something more. A stain of darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. The figure was there, like a ghost, unchanging. Letícia felt a shiver down her neck. The silence of the night was broken only by the slight hum of the computer. She zoomed in on the image, the skin on her arms goosebumping. The silhouette seemed to look back at her. A feeling of dread set in, the certainty that something was terribly wrong. In the days that followed, the news of the bridge spread, but what caught her attention most were the reports of strange deaths. Accidents that seemed to have a strange connection to the events on the bridge. A tourist who was on the skywalk died in a car accident, his windshield shattered by a truck that lost control. Another, who had narrowly escaped, slipped in a puddle of water in a mall, falling down a flight of glass stairs. The deaths were not just accidents. They were echoes of what she had seen, mirrors of the event she had prevented. The air was thick with the smell of a New York summer rain, mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee. Letícia, sitting at her desk, looked at the photos once more. The silhouette was there, in all of them, unchanging. The same dark stain. What was it? A reflection of destiny? A mark of what had been avoided? Or something more sinister? She felt a pang of pain in her chest, as if a shard of glass had hit her. The deaths were not coincidences, and she had the terrible feeling that the next victim would be herself. The biting cold of Chicago, with the icy wind coming from Lake Michigan, was a cruel contrast to the mild climate of New York. Letícia had fled, driven by a primitive instinct for survival. She believed that by moving away from the site of the Premonition, she could cheat destiny. The city, known for its imposing architecture and steel bridges, seemed like a safe haven. She stayed in a small hotel near the Magnificent Mile, the smell of mold and disinfectant mixing with the cold air coming in through the window. Her first trap came in a subtle way. While walking down Michigan Avenue, one of the busiest streets in the city, the reflection of a bus in a skyscraper made her stop abruptly. The image was distorted. The reflection trembled. For an instant, Letícia saw her own face cracking, as if it were reflected in a broken mirror. An icy shiver ran down her spine. She tried to ignore it, attributing the vision to tiredness, but something made her turn her gaze from the reflection to the street. A delivery truck with a large glass plate on its roof skidded on the wet asphalt and lost control, heading towards a post. If she hadn't stopped to look at the reflection, she would have been hit by the truck or by the pieces of glass that flew everywhere. Letícia felt the jolt of adrenaline. Destiny was following her, disguised in everyday accidents. She tried to call her trusted friend, an investigative journalist named Liam, 30, a man of quick and skeptical reasoning, who always helped her see things more rationally. "Liam, I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like I'm being followed. Not by a person, but by accidents," she whispered, her voice trembling. The line was silent for a moment. "Letícia, take a deep breath. Are you okay? The bridge, the scare. Maybe it's stress." He was trying to calm her down, but her voice sounded so real that he felt a slight discomfort. "No, it's real. And the people who were on the bridge, they're dying. As if they're falling, cutting themselves. It's as if destiny is trying to correct itself." Liam, despite his skeptical nature, was silent, Letitia's voice echoing in his head. Letícia continued to walk, her feet heavy, her hands sweating, despite the cold. The air of Chicago seemed to suffocate her. She felt like she was caught in a game of cat and mouse, where the cat was destiny itself and she was the prey, fighting to survive. The deaths, the accidents, the reflection in the glass, everything seemed to be fitting into a sinister pattern. She knew she needed to find out more, that she needed to understand what was happening. And the only clue she had was the dark silhouette in her photos. The shadow of destiny. The smell of roasted coffee and the fine drizzle of Seattle became Letitia's new refuge. The city, with its introspective atmosphere and lush nature, was the perfect place to hide, to think, to try to understand. Letícia felt like a ghost, wandering the streets, observing the lives of others, while her own seemed to be on a fragile thread, about to break. She rented a small apartment near a lake, with a view of the mountains and the soft sound of the water. The glass bridge of the Grand Canyon seemed like a distant nightmare, but the ghost of the dark silhouette in her photos still haunted her. The second trap came in a more direct way. While walking through the streets of Pike's Place Market, Letícia felt a strange attraction to a stall of antique mirrors. The saleswoman, an elderly woman with kind eyes, invited her to look. Letícia, hesitating, approached an oval mirror with a carved wooden frame. Looking at her reflection, she saw not herself, but a distorted image of a woman falling, her body spinning in the air, surrounded by shards of glass. Letícia took a step back, her heart pounding, and the mirror fell from a stand, shattering into 1,000 pieces. A sharp shard flew towards her, but luckily, the lady from the stall put herself in front, and the piece of glass cut her arm. Blood flowed, red and vivid. "You almost got hurt, dear," the lady said, with a gentle smile as Letícia trembled, the shock making her feel nauseous. Letícia returned to her apartment, terrified. Destiny was not just following her. It was actively trying to get revenge. She called Liam again. "Liam, it's getting worse. I almost died in Seattle. A mirror fell, and if I hadn't dodged it, I would have been hit in the neck. Destiny is trying to kill me, Liam." Her voice was at its limit. The panic was evident. Liam, on the other end of the line, felt the despair. "Letícia, I need you. I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Don't move. I'm coming to Seattle. What did you see? Tell me everything." The sound of Liam's voice was like an anchor in the middle of the storm. He, the skeptic, was starting to believe. The night in Seattle was cold and rainy. Letícia, sitting at the window, looked at the lights reflected in the dark water of the lake. The city, so far from New York, seemed not to be enough to protect her. Destiny was a silent, patient predator, waiting for the right moment to strike, and she was the prey. The smell of wet earth and the cold breeze did not calm her. She felt that at any moment, a shard of glass could come from anywhere. From a window, from a mirror, from a simple cup. The fear was paralyzing her. Liam, the journalist, arrived in Seattle with the fine, persistent rain. He stayed in the same hotel as Letícia and found her in a cozy cafe, the smell of espresso and freshly baked cookies filling the air. He saw her, her eyes deep set, her face pale. The Letícia he knew, vibrant and full of life, had disappeared. He listened to her, patiently, as she talked about the deaths, the silhouette in her photos, the accidents that haunted her. He looked at the photographs, the dark silhouette, and the image disturbed him. "What is that, Letícia?" "It looks like a flaw in the photo," he said, trying to sound rational, but there was a tone of uncertainty in his voice. "No, Liam, it's not a flaw. It's death. I think it's the personification of death, what I prevented, what I took from its natural course." Liam, however, could not accept it. He tried to find a logical explanation, a camera failure, a problem with the photo lab. But every explanation he gave was dismantled by the precision of the deaths, by the details Letícia told. A woman cut by a shard of glass on her face, a man falling down a glass staircase. Liam, the skeptic, was at a dead end. Letícia, feeling stronger with his presence, decided to return to the hotel. On the way, the third trap awaited them. They passed a shopping mall with a huge glass facade. Liam, immersed in thought, did not notice the delivery truck that was about to hit one of the columns. Letícia, however, saw it. She felt it. The heavy air, the smell of ozone, the crack in her ear. She screamed and pulled Liam, throwing him to the ground. The truck hit with a terrifying bang, and the glass facade of the mall shattered into 1,000 pieces, falling where they had been seconds before. A huge shard of glass embedded itself in the ground between them. Liam looked at her, shock stamped on his face. "Letícia?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "I don't know how you did that, but you saved me." He looked at the shard of glass and then at the broken facade. Destiny is indeed following you. The duo, now united in their terror, returned to the hotel. They knew that fleeing was not the solution. They needed to understand. They needed to face the shadow. Letícia, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, realized that her premonition was not just a vision. It was a warning that she had prevented, but that had not been completely undone. Liam's apartment in New York smelled of old books and paper. The place, far from being a peaceful refuge, became the center of their investigation. They were back in the city where it all began. Letícia, calmer, felt a strange serenity. She had accepted her destiny. Liam, on the other hand, was frantic. He spent hours researching premonitions, quantum physics, trying to find a rational explanation for the series of events. Letícia, however, knew that the answer was not in books or on the internet. It was in the photos, in the silhouette. She sat down, once again, in front of her computer. The sound of the computer fan was the only sound in the silence of the room. The smell of dust and paper was comforting. She looked at the image of the dark silhouette. This time, however, she noticed a detail that had escaped her sight before. In the center of the stain, there was a small glow, as if it were a reflection of a light. Liam, next to her, looked at the screen. "What is that, Letícia?" he asked, his voice low. "I don't know," she replied, "but I think it's what I need to face." The shadow was not an entity, but a reflection, a distortion. The dark silhouette, the personification of destiny, was there in all the photos. It was her own camera. It was the reflection of the broken glass on the bridge that had hit her. Letícia took her camera. She felt as if she was returning to ground zero. The weight of the camera in her hands was familiar. She turned it on, looked at the screen. In one of the videos, the dark silhouette appeared. Letícia then noticed something that made her feel an icy shiver. The silhouette was moving towards the lens. The image was getting closer, distorting, growing, like a spreading oil slick. The glow in the center of the silhouette became stronger. Letícia, with a scream, threw the camera to the floor. The camera screen shattered. The image of the dark silhouette was projected onto the floor in 1,000 pieces. The sound of a car alarm in the street of New York broke the silence. Letícia looked at Liam. "I understand," she whispered. "Destiny wasn't following me. I was carrying it with me. In my camera, In my photos, in my gaze. The premonition wasn't about the bridge. It was about her. It was about what she had seen, what she had prevented. Death had not been avoided, only postponed. Liam, on his knees, looked at the broken camera. The screen was shattered, and the image of the dark silhouette, the ghost of destiny, disappeared. Letícia, however, was no longer there. The room was silent. The sound of the New York summer rain, mixed with the smell of wet asphalt, was the only thing he heard. He looked out the window and saw his reflection, and in the reflection, he saw Letícia. She was there, smiling at him, her image fragmenting as if it were being undone, like an old photograph that disintegrates with time. The police arrived minutes later, called by neighbors who heard the sound of breaking glass. They found him in a state of shock in front of a broken camera. They took him away, and on the way, he saw a billboard. A huge image of a glass bridge. On the billboard, he saw Letícia, her image reflected, and on her face, there was a crack. The crack of the camera. The crack of destiny. The crack that was becoming more visible. Liam, back in his apartment, smelled coffee and rain. He looked out the window, the city of New York stretching out before him. The premonition wasn't about the bridge. It was about life. About how life is fragile, like a shard of glass, and how a single moment can change everything. Death is not something that can be avoided. It is only postponed, and destiny, like a cruel photographer, always finds the perfect angle for its next click. Liam picked up the phone and called the head of the journalism team. I have a story. It's about a photographer who saved dozens of lives, but couldn't save herself. It's about destiny, death, and a ghost that lives in photographs. And I have her last photo. What would you do if you knew that every click of your camera could be your last?